Hello everyone. I built a wall in my cellar to provide an appropriate location for installing a group of new electrical equipment, including solar electric equipment, a new main panel, and a critical load sub-panel. An important goal for this wall is to provide a non-combustible surface for mounting the solar equipment. I also needed to provide a vapor barrier to prevent the steel studs I used from rusting. And I had to replace the insulation I removed from the concrete block wall with insulation inside the new wall. Before we get started, this would be a good time to discuss some important requirements of the National Electrical Code that every electrician should be following in general. Because if you follow the instructions that come with electrical equipment, you'll be on your way to performing a code-compliant installation. Let's look at NEC Article 110.3. Examination, identification, installation, use and listing, product certification of equipment. NEC Article 110.3b, installation and use, says equipment that is listed, labeled, or both, or identified for a use, shall be installed and used in accordance with any instructions included in the listing, labeling, or identification. And there's an informational note that reads, the installation and use instructions may be provided in the form of printed material, quick response or QR code, or the address on the internet where users can download the required instructions. What this means for us is that when we install a UL listed electrical device, it's required that we install it according to the manufacturer's instructions. This includes everything we use in our electrical installations. And by the way, 110.3c requires us to install only electrical devices and equipment that are UL or ETL listed. Some examples of electrical devices and equipment we're required to apply this code to include things we might not have thought of, like wire nuts, crimp ferrules, and junction boxes, and equipment like inverters, main panels, circuit breakers, and everything else. I see a lot of people installing ferrules that are not UL listed. In fact, this ferrule crimper I got comes with a convenient box full of assorted ferrules that are not UL listed, so I won't be using them in any electrical installation. We need to be careful about the things we buy, and I found UL listed ferrules at Grainger for a reasonable cost. Okay, what the manufacturer's installation manual says is that the inverter and the batteries have to be spaced 1.5 inches from combustible surfaces. Oops, the instructions say 2 inches. Remember to follow the instructions. What the manufacturer's installation instructions say is that the inverter and the battery has to be spaced 2 inches from combustible surfaces. So if this were a combustible surface, which it's not, there would need to be 2 inches of airspace between the back of the inverter and the wall. But in this case, I removed all the insulation that was on this wall. It was that insulation that had a plastic layer over it, just laying on here, fiberglass. But that's not good for what I'm installing here. So I pulled that off, and I'm going to use a vapor barrier here to keep moisture from coming in through the wall. There's hundreds of gallons of or hundreds of pounds of water inside block walls like this, and the vapor can come in. So I'm installing a vapor barrier first, and it's going to be this foam board. First I'm going to stick a 1/4 inch piece of that board and then a sheet of it on those 1/4 inch spacers, so there'll be a 1/4 inch of air gap behind it, so if there is any moisture it can dry up. Then after that, I'm going to frame with metal studs a wall here, and that's going to leave about 1 inch space between the back of the metal stud and the vapor barrier. Then I'm going to insulate between the metal studs with mineral wool insulation, and they call it RockWool. So I'm going to use RockWool. It's fireproof. It's mildew and mold proof because it's made of rock, and it's fireproof because it's made of rock, and moisture and water don't harm it because it's made of rock. So it's superior to fiberglass insulation, so that's what I'm going to be using here. Plus, it's going to be behind this inverter, and so that's non-combustible, so that makes it safe. They have steel studs, non-combustible insulation, and then the finish wall over that will be cement board. And so the whole thing, like 5.5 inches thick, will be non-combustible. And there's an air space, and then the foam board insulation, which is actually combustible, but it's safe because it's got 5.5 inches to the back of the inverter. Okay, this is what the material I'm using looks like. Fan fold. Owens Corning Formulaire fan fold re-siding board. It's actually meant to go underneath of siding on the house. But what it is XPS, Expanded Polystyrene. And so this makes a good vapor barrier. I'm going to use this as the vapor barrier for that wall back there. High performance XPS insulation. That's expanded polystyrene. And this is only 1/4 inch thick, so it won't offer much insulation value. It's actually an R1, which is about as good as a plate glass window, one layer of glass. However, it's equivalent in permeability to the craft paper on a regular fiberglass insulation bat, that paper backing. This has the same permeability, and that's what I'm looking for. The ability to inhibit or retard vapor from passing through. It's not a vapor barrier, it's a vapor retarder. Expanded polystyrene and craft face fiberglass bats are both Class 2 vapor retarders. This expanded polystyrene foam board is in the same vapor retarder class as the familiar craft paper on fiberglass bats. So these have the same vapor retardant classification. Now this block wall stays quite dry, as is evidenced by the excellent condition of the plywood breaker panel backer, which is firmly attached directly to it. There's no sign of moisture damage showing on this wood at all, even after 30 years. And there's absolutely no indication of moisture or wood decay at all down here. These blocks across here were all completely dry. This is dry. If I look back here, everything's dry. And being that the humidity level in the cellar is quite reasonable, I think this will work fine for my needs here. So I already cut 3 pieces out. That's all I need. This is 4 feet wide, and I need 10 feet, so I'm going to cut this one in half so it's I have a 2 foot wide section. Using this board just to hold it flat. I'm just using a felt tip marker to mark 2 feet. Okay, now just connecting the dots. Okay, to do the cutting, First I'm going to start with this thin piece of panel. It's actually a kickboard for kitchen cabinet. Putting it face down, I'm just using it to cut on here. It is 4 feet long. Using a metal straight edge and just a regular utility knife with a brand new blade, so I know it's sharp. Brand new razor blade. Oh, swerved off course a bit there. So this is the only time I'm cutting this material that I'm going to show it on camera. This is just so you get the idea. You don't need to see all the cuts I do. This side came out a little smoother, so I'm going to use this side on the wall. I previously measured and marked the wall for chalk lines. I'm placing a spacer every 2 feet, so these lines will be every 2 feet. You can't see the marks here, but I can. This line will be the edge of one of the foam board panels. This line will be the center of one of the foam board panels. I'll snap the remaining lines off camera. I'm using some of the 1/4 inch foam board to provide spacers that will hold the vapor barrier a 1/4 inch away from the block. This will allow airspace so the blocks can dry if there's moisture seeping through the wall. It will also keep the foam board dry because any water running down the block surface will have enough space to prevent contacting the board. However, the Foamular XPS isn't affected by water, so it's no big deal if it gets a little wet. I'm primarily interested in allowing airspace for drying back there. I'm placing these 6x8 spacers evenly across the chalk lines. By the way, the temperature in here is above the minimum temperature for application. See, so these blocks are 8 inches tall, so 1, 2, 3, that's 24 inches. And I put my blue chalk lines every 24 inches. The nerve of somebody using hot water. Which, by the way, this water heater is still going strong. There hasn't been a hiccup since I fixed it. Not one hiccup. Three, 4, 5. I need 5 more. I have 6 more. That's good. So I'm going to need to get another tube at least of that construction adhesive. I do have another tube, but I'm going to need more to stick this stuff in place. Because there's a layer going over the top of this. Loctite PL300 foam board construction adhesive. I started this process by making my first mistake. This piece will need to be pulled back off and used in a different location. By the way, these are really stuck well. They're really solid on there. That adhesive really holds this stuff to the concrete block big time. Oi. Lining it up with that blue line there. The smaller pieces were much easier to handle. The large pieces were too heavy to stay stuck at first. The fan fold wasn't helping. Gotta get it before the glue dries. Hold the back there. Is it on the blue line on the edge?
No. It is up here, but not down here. Not on it.
Oh, it's, yeah, it can come over that way a little. On the bottom here. All right. Now. It's coming out. And all those spurs are. Keep hitting the top here. Here. It's gonna fall. Keep holding the top. It's empty. That little piece on the bottom, those two smaller pieces were easy, they just stuck. The adhesive was already skinning up too much to be very sticky, so I had to add some in spots. Get that upper corner there some more. Okay, don't hold pressure between the blocks. You can feel where the see 2 feet below that is one. There you go. He was antsy to get going because he was hosting a scheduled event online that was about to begin. Might stick. Okay. Got stuff on you?
No, not a lot.
Okay.
Is that it?
So,
Okay.
thank you. I started putting the insulation sealing tape on in hopes the panels would help support each other while the adhesive was curing. This did help a lot. This is insulation sealing tape, so it'll probably help hold things also while it's setting up. CRAFTSMAN Select. This feels like it might still have something in it. And this seems to be popping out in the middle here, so let me see what I have. Oh yeah. This feels a lot like just regular packaging tape, but it's sold as insulation sealing tape. So these tap guns I'm using have a head that's a 1/2 inch wide, so I'm using a 1/2 inch spade bit to countersink 3/4 of an inch deep in the 2x4. That'll leave more than an inch and probably an inch and a half that will go down into the concrete. I'm just eyeballing the center. I'm just going to pre-drill the hole the rest of the way through with a drill bit. I've got spacers in there 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches plus the thickness of the foam board is 1.75 inches away from the wall. So I've got the carbide tip bit that comes with the Tapcons. You usually get a bit in the box when you buy them. And there's a stop rod on here that's set to give me a little over 1.5 inches depth on the hole. The depth stop rod just wasn't working with the 2x4 in the way. So I marked all the holes through the plate, then moved it out of the way and drilled almost the whole bit depth. As you can see, I added sill seal to provide a barrier between the pressure treated sill plate and the metal rail. I'm laying a 10-foot track on top of a 10-foot 2x4. They call it rail, I believe, yeah. This 2x4 is a little too long. I need to line it up with that end. I'll put a couple screws every 16 inches. These are self-tappers, obviously. marking off every 16 inches. Okay, now I'm going to start cutting the metal framing. I'm going to need a stud here, this tall, which is like 74 inches, and then one here, which is 89 inches. And then I'll cut a couple that fit in there. I'm going to have to cut a rail to go at this height, and then one to go at this height all the way across. So we'll just start by showing you how I'm cutting them. It's actually not difficult to cut this stuff. I already marked it. Excuse me. And since I want this to be 74 inches height, I marked it at 73 3/4. So it's easy to get those two side cuts here, and then you can just bend it back like that, and that's the line you want to cut across. But I've discovered I really don't have a pair of snips that gets in there and cuts, so I'm just doing this. And that's a good clean cut. The metal studs have pre-punched holes in them. One down there that would be basically where you might put you're going to run cables through these. So one down there would be for receptacles along the wall, near the base of the wall. They just drop into the rail and twist. And then up here would be a higher level where you might have some lights or some wiring. And then higher up there, even more places for wiring. You might have sconce lights or what have you, where you just need to run wires through there. Now I cut that 73 3/4 because it doesn't have to be all the way down on the metal on the bottom. It can be an 1/8 inch up or an 1/8 inch low here. The screws are going to hold the position when you put the screws in. You just use a magnetic level to make sure they're plumb. So I put a vice grip on the bottom there just to hold it, to clamp it. This is level, or plumb I should say. That's plumb. I need to put a couple of screws in the bottom now, just to hold it there. Okay, so I used a vice grip to clamp this into position down here. I'm going to put a little screw right in here. Make sure this is plumb. And I'll put a screw on the back side, if I can.
If it isn't obvious, this is the first time I've ever worked with metal framing. I watched a few videos to get the gist of it, but now it's just learn by doing mode. It really isn't very complex. It's just going to take some practice.
That's good there. Drop it down in there and give it a twist, and it'll twist right into place.
I'd rather use a little pony spring clamp than vice grips, but I couldn't find them. They might be down in the barn. Perfect. So I'm using my Klein angle finder and the level over here at the same time. I need to make sure that this is at 90 degrees to level, as in perfectly plumb. That's plumb. 39, I'll go 40 inches. That leaves a little extra so I have ears to bend over here. I doubt if this will cut it.
All of this cutting would have gone a lot smoother if I had the right tin snips to do both left side and right side cuts.
Halfway. Check this again. $37 and a half. Okay. $37 and a half. So I'm cutting to this mark. This will go over the top here. And this mark goes to the inside here. So I'm cutting this part out and leaving these two sides on. They're called ears. And that's to drill attach it to here. Got some sharp edges on there. That's perfect, 90 degrees there. That's perfect, 90 degrees there. Perfect 90. You can't see it, but it says it's a perfect 90. I'm going to put a screw on this ear back here. Fastening the back ear there. So I do have a sketched out plan about where everything's going to go, and I stuck that up here just for reference. What I'm working on next is to put the rail across the top here over to the stud on this end. And that's going to be 25 inches from the wall. I already marked the spot down there, so all that's left to do is to screw it in down there. And then I can put this rail across the top of those two. Perfect 90 degrees right there. Settled out, perfect 90 degrees. And the difficulty over here is that I have to work it behind all these wires. I pulled all the staples so that this thing can get behind them. That one I won't get behind. Or that one. These branch circuits will soon all be relocated to the critical loads panel. I removed all the staples so they can pass over the top rail. I added 2 more studs on 16-inch centers, then realized my plan neglected to consider the possibility of adding a future third battery.
So you can see on the back of the battery here, these brackets, this hole and this hole are 16 inches apart. Same with those down there. This is the mounting bracket. It comes off the back of the battery. You bolt the bracket to the wall and then hang the battery on it. Now the purpose of that bracket is not to hold the weight of the battery. It's just to keep it from tipping over, really. The battery's standing on those 6 rubber feet on the concrete floor, and that's what it'll be doing over here. Actually, this is the position where the third battery, the optional third battery, might eventually be installed. But you can see what I had to do. I removed the stud that was here, and I put 2 studs in here, 16 inches apart, to support that bracket. And then, so the bracket will bolt in here and here. And I cut these to put in. They're not attached yet, but those are going to firm it up. So I need to determine the location for these, but the bolt holes for those brackets will go right through here, and here, and here, and here. I can still raise this up or down wherever it needs to be because I haven't attached them yet. I haven't fastened them. When I get the right dimensions, I'll fasten them. I'll put screws in on these wings here, on these tabs, and then I'm going to drill right through this and the stud and all the way through the back here, the back part. And I'll put a piece of threaded rod through there and a nut and a bolt, 2 nuts on the rod and 2 nuts on the rod here, and it'll be sticking out here. And that's what I'll hang the bracket on. Same thing here. Piece of threaded rod, 2 nuts on it, on the back 2 nuts on it, and on that one as well, the same way. That way I'll really be able to tighten the bracket up. These extra braces will give the wall a lot of extra stiffness, and there's no way this thing's ever going to fall over. It's standing on the concrete floor, and it's going to have this wall keeping it from tipping. What I haven't done yet also here is I haven't secured the top of the wall, this top rail. You might have noticed I haven't secured it. So I need to put some lumber across here to screw this into, and then I can set it plumb in and out there. So the optional third battery will go there. I'll have to buy another battery if I put it there. There will be the inverter here and the other battery right here, so I need to add 2 more studs to support that battery the same way I did that. And then over here below the window will be 2 more studs, and they'll be braced just like I did that. And that's where the second battery is going. So it's going to be inverter here, battery, battery, then maybe in another year or 2 there'll be another battery here.
I needed 5 34-inch long, 2.5-inch cuts. Two of them needed a blade's width taken off. I did my best to square them up. I'm finally getting around to securing the top rail of the metal framing system. It took me until now because I really didn't know how I was going to do it. But I decided on providing purlins, for lack of a better word, across the bottom of the first 3 floor joists to fasten the top rails to. There's a 2.5-inch gap between the floor joists and the top rail, so I cut the purlins from 2x4s down to 2.5 inches wide. You could say I turned 2x4s into 2x3s. I fastened them to the floor joists with 4-inch screws, after pre-drilling pilot holes to prevent the lumber from splitting. This turned out to be a very solid system.
A little bit of a shim in there because there's a little gap, very small. That is solid. It's just screwed into this, which is only screwed into these places so far, these 2 spots. I want to try to put a screw up through here. It'll have to be angled slightly back to hit that floor joist. Let me give it a pilot hole. That's not going anywhere. It's through the metal rail, through the 2x4 that's 2.5 inches thick now, and up into the floor joist. And that's perfectly plumb. 90 degrees. So I'd really like to support this stud very well and have this over here, over close to it. But I can't get the drill inside there to work it. So it's going to have to be on the outside of this stud. So that's where I'm going with it. I used a framing square to set them perpendicular to the floor joists. Pretty darn good there. Solid as a rock. never going to move. Tight as I can possibly get it. That's a 4-inch screw going through the sheet metal, the metal rail here, through the 2.5-inch nailer here, or screwer, and into the bottom of the floor joist. So it's 2.5 minus the thickness of that. So that puts 2 inches of screw into the bottom of the floor joist. This thing is solid as can be. Same thing on these. 2 inches into the floor joist. This one definitely needs to be shimmed. There's a lot of space in there. Okay. And I cut a notch out here to make clearance for this gas pipe, which hangs down just a little bit low here. $90. 90 degrees exactly. Now this one needs some shimming as well, just to take up a little of that free. There's no gap there now. And yeah, I think I need to use a pilot hole on these. I don't want them splitting. Solid as a rock. And 89.9 degrees. So almost perfectly plumb. That's very close. It is solid. There's a tap con in here into the block wall and a tap con here into the block wall. So these two studs are very solidly supported, which is good because there's going to be a battery screwed to them or bolted to them down below here.
I measured and cut 16 stainless threaded rods to 4 3/4 inches. Deburring and tapering the lead-in threads. Got to make sure they thread into a nut. Not bad. Perfect. I drilled these battery bracket mounting holes in the stud braces in a previous video. The process of installing the brackets begins with aligning those 16-inch on-center holes with the measurements I previously marked for the height on the studs. I need to get the holes in the braces as close to perfectly aligned with the crease in the center of the stud face as possible with just my micrometer. I used a pair of vice grips to clamp each side in place. Supposed to be 25.6 inches. Which this is at 25 and 5/8. I think I actually want to go just a little bit lower. Now that I'm reviewing this offline here, the spec is 25.6 inches from the floor. So 25 and 9/16 inches would be good. That's 25.563 inches, very close to 25.6. Yeah, it's less than 25 and 5/8. Maybe I'll go even lower still. That's good. It's about 25 and 17/32. So how's this side? This still reads level. Oh yeah, 25 and 17/32. Okay. Just want to tighten these up a little. Re-verify. Yep, that's good. That's good. Now the only problem is there's that crease mark down the middle of the stud here. This one is centered. This one is more than 1/8 of an inch off. Yeah, these aren't quite exactly 16 inches on center, are they? I gotta try to get that closer. I'm going to have to try to squeeze these in together a little bit to get this closer to the center of that stud. This one's centered, this one's not. Okay, I pulled them together a little bit with a ratchet strap. The height on that hole is ever so slightly high. Let's see. I better clamp it. So it'll stay put. That's good. If anything, it's a tad low. acceptable. Let's see how level it seems to be. Yeah, that's good. 0.1 degree, that's fine. The important thing is that these holes are the same height. No, that's a little high. Okay, that's good. And that one's still really good. It's 0.1 degree off. That's fine. I'll take it. The pre-drilled holes in the braces served as a guide for drilling the 3/8 inch holes in the studs. I took them up in 3 increasing sized steps. This is a 3/8 bit. Just going through that crease on the other side. I can see it. I'm still drilling in steps of gradually increasing size. That's lined right up with the other hole there that I already pre-drilled. Just to keep this from moving, when I put this on the inside here, I have to put 2 nuts on it. One with the flange facing this way, and the other one with the flange facing that way. And these edges are really sharp. I need to be careful about that. Someone might say I should wear gloves, but I wouldn't be able to get in here with my hands and do this with gloves on. I just have to be careful. There is such a thing. And now a nut on the back. Oops. And these are 9/16 hex. The serrated flanges on these nuts prevent them from loosening. Okay, that's tight. So the center of that threaded rod coming through there is exactly where I want it. About 17-30 seconds. And this is what that looks like in there. Bolting the other side was the same process. That's tight. Pretty much exactly 16 inches on center. And they're the right height. Maybe even just a touch low, which is preferable. So the spacing on those is perfect. That's awesome. So now, just to be on the safe side, well, for one thing, I've got to make sure that these are basically at the center of the hole, up and down also. And level, that's perfectly level. Now I can use these holes to mark the studs there. This is the best way to make sure that everything's spaced properly. I mean, I could try using a transfer punch, but transfer punching into sheet metal just doesn't work. Not very well. Not in this, not in these conditions. So this is supposed to be a minimum of 28 and 60 thousandths. 3 divided by 32 is 93 thousandths. The minimum is 60 thousandths, so that's 30 thousandths higher than the minimum. Probably very good. There's my marks. They're slightly higher than the measurement marks I made. This one's slightly lower. Let me get down there and measure again. That's slightly lower than 15 and 7/16. It's about 15 and 3/8. It's even slightly lower than that. This one's even slightly lower than that. Okay. After everything's aligned, the process of drilling and bolting the bottom stud brace is the same as the top one.
Look at that. That's good alignment. It's not perfect, but it's as close as I can ask for. Really good. Zero degrees. That's perfectly level. That's like many times more rigid than it was before I put those braces in. Perfect.
In order to mark for the holes for the top bracket, this is the bracket that the inverter hangs on. They give you that cross brace piece that you would bolt onto your mounting bolts for the battery. Now I did originally mark my holes doing it that way. I have a battery here. I'm mocking this up. This battery is in the correct position on its battery mount. The weight is resting on the floor, but the battery bracket is bolted in its station there, here behind it. And I have the conduit box bolted to the top of the battery. I originally did use that cross bracket to mark some spots here for holes, but I didn't feel confident that they were exactly where they needed to be. I want the inverter to rest on top of here like it's supposed to. There's screw holes in the top of the conduit box to screw the bottom of the inverter to the box. I want the inverter resting on top of that and hooked on here, which will prevent it from tipping out. But I don't want a ton of weight from the inverter hanging on this bracket. I want this bracket just to keep the inverter from tipping over. And when I put the cross braces across here behind this, like I did on the battery brackets, the top part of those metal studs will also be very rigid like they were down below, or like they are down below. So this cross brace comes with the kit. I think it came with in the battery box actually. I got two of them, one with each battery. They have these hinges, and you're supposed to mount the bottom onto the battery bracket mounting studs there. I'll actually turn it down. And these are supposed to fall in the position where your top bracket mounting holes, your inverter bracket mounting holes should be. But there's all kinds of play in that. It's all over the place. These hinges have too much slop in them for this to inspire much confidence. Let's put it that way. So I could just mark that there, but as this goes back and forth, that hole also moves up and down as in the arc of the swing of the arc here. So I didn't really trust it. In order to find the correct placement for this bracket,
I measured to the top of the box here, 44.5 inches. And I measured the mounting pockets on the back of the inverter. They slide down over this bracket here. And hang on to there and there. And the bottom of that pocket will be coming down into here. So when I measured the back of the inverter from the floor, which would be here where it's sitting, to the bottom of the pockets, there's support pockets that fall onto this bracket here and here. And I measured 30.25 inches. So I have this exactly at 30.25 inches. On this top edge. Now I think the pockets might actually fall down into this little notch here and here. But I'm not trying to account for that. When the inverter slides down onto here, the bottom edge of those pockets is going to be at this height here, which will be all the way down on these catches. So now that I set this to that height and it's level, I discovered that when I marked it with that X bracket, it's actually about 1/8 of an inch or so higher up if I were to use those holes than where I just moved it down to. So I moved it down 1/8 of an inch, and I think I'm going to have a better time with that. So the total is
74 3/4 inches.
at the top of this top edge of the bracket.
74 3/4 inches.
This is what I have from the floor to up there. Now the reason I'm doing that way as opposed to having this be up a little higher is because I'm not hanging the inverter on this bracket. I'm resting the inverter on top of the conduit box, and then the bracket will be there just to keep the inverter from tipping forward. The conduit box is going to hold the weight of the inverter, and that's actually according to the instructions. So I don't know why they want you to have this a little bit higher so this holds weight. It doesn't need to hold weight as far as I can tell, and I really don't want to put that weight on these on this metal stud frame. It's not necessary. This stud frame is just to prevent it from tipping out. And of course the battery is already on a bracket that keeps it from tipping out. I don't have the screws in on the side yet, but this thing won't tip out no matter what, because it's on that battery bracket that hooks in like this, so it can't tip out. At 300 pounds, it's not going to jump out of there. In the corrugated carton that this box came in, it was in this plastic bag, so I put it over everything here just to keep chips from falling down into these holes. Okay, so that bracket's up. Got the 4 bolts made out of threaded rods holding it up. I have a stud brace going across on the top and on the bottom, so both of those are braced. I'm getting ready to hoist the inverter up on top here. And I'm going to use that winch that we saw before in that video about receiving this freight shipment from Texas of this solar equipment. This all came from Signature Solar in Texas.
The top of the inverter hit the bottom of the drill,
Close, but not quite.
so that's the highest I can lift it with the drill.
Not quite. Do this last little bit by hand because there's no space for the drill in here. But I do have a couple of inches more of travel available on this cable, so still gotta go higher. Put it down a little now. The pocket is caught on the bracket on that side. I think the problem is because this is a little bit crooked by the way this is attached up here. Unfortunately. Like right now there's almost no weight on that winch. It's over this way too far also. There it is. So there's a bunch of plugs for the knockouts on the bottom here that are supposed to align with the knockouts in the top of this conduit box. So I guess I should have removed them before I set this down here. Now I've got to try to lift it back up, drop all of these out, and then put it back down in place. The other thing I need to do is there's these 4 nuts and bolts here that I need to remove because those holes are for the bolts that hold the inverter to the top of the conduit box. Now I've got to find a way to lift this enough so all these can drop out. It's got to be lifted about 1/2 inch. So let that be a warning to you if you're installing one of these. Take these plugs out first before you mount it up here. It's high enough where I can slide them out, pull them out from behind. knockouts are open now. Still hooked on back there. That might be good right there. I can't see the size on that. That's the size. Allen head. Button head, Allen head. That's one. So that's definitely something I should have done before I set it up here. Oh well. On the final installation, when I'm setting it up here, this will all be done. Because I'm doing it now. I'm going to put a couple of these bigger ones in here just to hold everything lined up. That's kind of an initial alignment. But I can see these little bolt holes aren't quite lined up. I'm going to need a little drift to line them up. So that's what it looks like there. You can see the 4 bolts. There's 2. There's the other 2. And there's a whole bunch of knockouts in the bottom there to pass wires through and cables. And there's a knockout plug like this. There's one for every hole, so you can plug the holes you don't use. So this is what it looks like. I put slack on this cable here. It's not really holding anything. If I grab the handles on the side, I can't budge it. That's all I'm after. It's stable. It's not going to tip over. The battery's in its mounting bracket, which holds it firmly, and the mounting bracket on top on the back of the inverter obviously does a good job as well. There's no play in it at all, really. The movement you see is in that top rail of the metal studs. For the most part, maybe a small amount of flex in the studs, that's it. So this is what it looks like. The wall bracket for the other battery is there. This battery is attached to its wall bracket that's behind it. And the 18 kV hybrid inverter is it's supported on top of the conduit box there that it's bolted to. And it's firmly attached to the wall by the bracket behind it, toward the top of it. Everything lines up and fits as I would expect, as I would hope. So my mock-up is complete. I'm ready to take it all down now and take everything off, take the mounting brackets off the wall, and go ahead and start putting the wall board up.
I was hoping to get that all done in this video, but it's gotten so long I'll have to end this one here. Please stay tuned for the next installment, where I complete the insulation in this solar equipment wall and close it up with cement board and plywood in preparation for mounting all the new electrical equipment. Thank you for watching. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.